Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Penske Podcast. You haven't tuned in before. This is a podcast where we are running through all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. And right now we're up to episode 18 of season 7. It's called Eye of the Beholder. Directed by Cliff Bole. Teleplay goes to Renee Echevarria. Story credit goes to Brennan Braga. Aired back on February 28th, 1994. In this episode, Counselor Troi's investigation into the suicide of a crewman suggests a murder was committed aboard the Enterprise while it was being built, and that the murderer is still on board. Tana and Sean are here to talk about this one, so let's go deep on a Troi-centric murder mystery, the wonderful, the illustrious Eye of the Beholder, right after this.
You were Lieutenant Kwan's supervisor at Utopia Planitia.
That's right. I was sorry to hear what happened.
Did you ever spend time in the nacelle control room while it was under construction?
I worked all over the ship. In fact, I remember running a power conduit right behind this wall here.
Were you ever in the nacelle room at the same time as Lieutenant Kwan?
It was a long time ago. People were working all over the place.
So you do not remember?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Do you recall if anything unusual happened there?
How do you mean?
An altercation, perhaps, possibly involving Lieutenant Kwan?
No, nothing like that. The way I remember it, things went pretty smoothly. What's this all about, if you don't mind my asking?
Not at all. When I was in the nacelle room, I had an empathic experience.
We believe the counselor may have been seeing an event that occurred 8 years ago.
And I saw you there. Do you have any idea why that might be?
I'm afraid I don't.
Lieutenant, are you aware that I can sense when someone's telling the truth?
I've heard that.
Then I'm sure that if you remember anything that might be relevant to our investigation, you'll contact me.
Of course.
Hey, Tana, Sean, welcome back to the podcast. We're going to talk about Eye of the Beholder.
Last time, maybe.
Yeah.
So glad to be here for
That's
the
right.
last time.
If you hear the champagne bottles popping in the background, it's we're pouring out the bubbly as
So-
we celebrate.
I've got wine.
Wes, was this more fun than you thought? More exhausting than you thought? Are you happy to see the end coming? What's going through your mind?
I'll talk about this briefly. I do have a last podcast planned, but I can talk about it briefly.
Okay.
Just saying that. I guess it's a mix. I'm happy that it's ending. I'm a little bit sad that it's ending. I feel like it went well. I feel like I got everything that I needed to say across. My one sort of big takeaway is that it makes me a little bit sad that I now know that there are no TNG episodes which I'd never seen, which before we started doing this, I used to have a big binder because I burned all the DVDs in high school. I used to have a big binder of of all the episodes, and I would flip through them. And for some reason, in the back of my mind, I always felt like I would stumble on an episode that I'd never seen before.
Right.
And for some reason, I always kept holding on to that belief, even though it's turned out to not be true. I had seen them all before this rewatch, but the rewatch now definitively tells me there is no more TNG for you to find.
Aww.
You do have the opening episode of Deep Space, which does have Picard in it, right?
Yep.
So that's something. Plus,
Frakes.
you have a lot of Star Trek edits on YouTube you can go through, which has Picard.
I did.
when they
I
mix
do
them
want
up.
to make a lot of lists and things like that. I've been bad with my best of and worst of lists, but I want to get back into doing the silly list things and all
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is episode 18 of season 7. We only got a few more. Eye of the Beholder, guys. What did you think? How about Sean? You start because Tana went first last time.
I know how Star Trek always had a thing where no one could die on the ship because there's too many computers and no one would get away with it, and it's nice to see them try to do that in a compelling way. I'm not sure it works. I am interested in the dating of Worf and Troi, which I feel is very forced but not impossible.
Okay. Yeah, Tana, go ahead.
I really like this episode. I'm glad that we're going to talk about it in depth, but I hadn't realized that this is the episode where they make out for the first time, and I got super fangirl excited when I realized that was what was going to happen. And so for that alone, this episode is up there for me.
Nice. So I guess that the thing about this, like Sean was saying, that the writers always kind of complained that they could never do a murder mystery on the show because the technology gets in the way. Everyone would just be like, well, why don't we look at the hidden camera, which is clearly, obviously, in every single room and see what happened. I think they do a pretty effective job getting around that. This is also an episode that I've seen many times, but I can never really remember how it goes, which is weird to me. And maybe that's a sign that it's a good mystery, because I am always sort of confused and always going like, oh, yeah, that's right, that's what happened. Even though I think the casting of Boggs as the killer is kind of tipping your hand to that this guy's a bad dude. So I guess let's get the Worf and Troi thing out of the way so we can focus on the meat of the episode.
What took them so long?
This is the second episode where it's been hinted that they're at something, because Parallels was the one that sort of kicked everything off. My wife was very excited. She came in late to this one. I was at the end, and she saw them sort of going together. She's like, oh, what's been going on with them? I said, oh, they had sex. She said, you have to show me the scene where we see the morning after. So I showed her the scene with the morning after. I cringed a little bit. It's not great.
It's not great.
Thoughts on the Troi-Worf relationship, especially at this point in the series? Is it necessary?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I totally rolled my eyes when the morning after they bone for the first time, he's in full uniform. Like, he isn't, it's not,
Sashless.
There's no level of undress.
That's
he's
how you know he got
100% dressed. Yeah. And it's like, breakfast is ready, and she is also fully dressed. And so it's just like they were just doing some serious snugging last night.
Yeah,
I'm trying to imagine.
Probably just a lot of kissing and sort of touching above the shirts and everything. I'd imagine.
Yeah. And she, so he's like, breakfast is ready. And she goes, it can wait. And I totally expected her to plant some big steamy kiss on him, but instead they just like awkwardly hug for a little while.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Dr. Crusher, who spent the entire series trying to get people laid, is the cock block in this, where she pages them and is like, I need both of you to come do some nonsense up here on the bridge.
I wonder if Troi rubs against. I think Worf's forehead would be a nice thing for a lady to
That's
rub
the
up
thing.
against.
The ridge is on his forehead.
It is shaped that way. It's like if you had cast the clay and lady teabagged it and then let it dry, put it on someone's head. That's what this clean-on forehead looks like. Like a bunch of labias.
It does. It has a very labial quality to it.
Yeah, it's kind of a labia doing like when the dog rubs its ass on the carpet. It's kind of like that kind of a thing. It's kind of just
is it ribbed for her enjoyment?
Oh yeah, it's like he's got like French ticklers for eyebrows. It's perfect.
It's unfortunate that women can't have orgasms, because he would really be able to.
I know. I mean, he's basically
That's my personal experience
He's
anyway.
got vibrating beads and rabbit ears coming out of his forehead. It's perfect.
And the growling would work as like a low vibration. Like it's just he's built for this, man.
Basically,
How did she not jump on the Worf ride earlier?
Yeah,
she mentions it. She says, "How could this not have happened earlier?"
Yeah,
I think that this is a bad decision at this point in the show.
You take that back, Wes.
I don't, especially with the way things go. It feels like a totally pointless, weird sort of dithering without really knowing anything that's going on. Like,
right.
I don't even know if does the relationship even make sense. Really, is it right that
it makes total sense?
You think so? Why is that?
Because I love them and I love their relationship,
all right.
and it's not based on anything concrete or sensible.
Yes,
so
it's pure knee jerk.
I am sort of with both you guys on this. Like, I can see the excitement and the giddiness of it, because does it make sense? No, but there's fucking nothing else happening in season 7. At least season 7 can forever be referred to as the season when they finally hooked up. Finally.
Yes.
I think they threw it in there because they're like, well, we only have a lot of food on the table. Why don't we just do this? And I think it's absurd. I don't think it makes sense. There's no payoff, but at least it keeps it interesting because there ain't nothing else happening.
Why doesn't it make sense? Why do you guys say it doesn't make sense?
I mean, they're like just the total opposites. She's just such a patsy, and he's just all testosterone, and I just don't see them coming together.
Opposites attract. Anyway, do you remember that dialogue that she had when they're in Troy's room and they're talking about her memories of her Betazid granddad? And he's like, she's like, I can only ever remember his stories when I'm sitting by a fire. And Worf is, totally Worfish when he's like, I too have sought visions in the fire.
That was the episode that Sean actually watched, the Rightful Heir episode where he saw some visions.
I think that what annoys Worf like nothing else is when people are really like over emotional and over analyze, and she encapsulates all the things that drive him crazy.
Yes,
every other girl he's ever been with was very intense and consistent, and this is way off the reservation for him.
That's true.
Isn't it exactly the same as like whatever her name is that he had Alexander with? Well, how are they different?
I think the Alexander thing is interesting because parallels where it kickstarted seem to imply that the reason Worf wants to be in a relationship is because Troi is like a mother to Alexander. And that seems to be like his sort of main drive in doing it.
That I did like. He saw the benefit of her motherliness did wake something in him, and he's doing finally he's doing something that's like good for his son.
Right. Yeah. So we haven't seen him in 2 years, but Alexander is allegedly still on the ship.
No.
Yeah. I think, right? Am I wrong about that? Now that I've said it, I kind of feel like
didn't he go off with the Russian grandparents already?
They gave him back when they reminded Worf that he's a dipshit for sticking them with his fucking kid. Well, I think he's just been wandering the halls of the ship. I don't even think Worf knows where he's been.
That's right. That's totally right.
I don't think there's too much to discuss about the Worf, but I do want to talk about the main plot here and what is objectively a Troi episode. I really like the murder plot here. And I feel like it's lacking something, but at the same time, I can't identify what's missing from it. How do you guys feel that they did when they went around this murder? Do you feel that the murder itself and the mystery around it was satisfying?
I did. I felt like the ending nullified a lot of that. I think they ripped the rug out from under me in a way that I found deeply unsatisfying, because this is one of my favorite episodes. Maybe it's like an iconic episode. I haven't watched TNG very much, but when I started this episode, I was like, oh, and bits and pieces were coming back to me about, I was like, oh, that's the like rapey murderer guy. I remember that's a reflection, and so I liked puzzling it out with, sort of scattershot memory of it. And it was a very enjoyable way that they presented the mystery. But the end is just like, oh, just kidding, you were asleep. So none of the Worf stuff happened in real life. None of the,
so
a lot of the conversations.
You're considering the end to be where it's revealed that she's been in like an alternate universe for a little bit. Okay.
Because she spaced out.
I was thinking you meant the end where they reveal that the guy killed himself and the other two.
Yeah, which totally doesn't make sense given the rest of the... I feel like if she was going to go in a disassociative dream state, then certain details, like the murderer having joined the Enterprise crew 2 years ago and being on board still, and her interviewing him, and then other stuff happening, and then going back, and then he's at her room, and all of that is superfluous and unnecessary. And if the guy, it turns out, actually just killed himself and covered up the murder of the woman, and the skeleton was never really in the wall, was it?
No.
That was something that she invented?
Yep, that's just and she invented it as a visual way for the audience to understand what happened, I guess. Would be
right.
I mean, I think that I sort of disagree in that I do like the way that it wraps up, because if that guy had actually been on the ship, I found that to be a little bit less believable than him killing himself and the memory just being the only thing that remained.
Right. I 100% agree with that assessment.
Okay. Sean, what did you think?
Well, on Twitter, I admitted I got confused. I didn't rewatch this one, so I'm kind of like I'm looking at the reviews right now. Well, so I'm curious.
Way to come prepared. Way to do your homework, Sean.
You're lucky I got my computer working this time.
Way to go out in true Murphy style.
My question, and a lot of the episodes coming back to me at the beginning, why didn't they just freeze the guy or beam him away from the thing? Why didn't Riker just tackle him? Why wasn't Troi there? Like, that's kind of her job, is to talk someone off the ledge.
Yep.
And I don't remember the guy who did it being sufficiently motivated to do what he did. I just felt kind of let down. Like, he wasn't crazy enough. He wasn't psychotic enough. I mean, the idea of someone on the ship really
the killer or the guy who killed himself at the very start.
All right, so then I'm forgetting which happened actually.
So there's
the guy that killed himself. Why did he do it?
Because he walked into the same trap that Troi did, where he went into this area and got hit by this like historical empathic memory that caused him to go through the same version of what Troi went through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
do we think that the guy that kills himself in the opening scene experienced the same thing that Troi did? That the guy was on the ship, that he, was.
He had some sort of jealous relationship. Yeah, like he experienced all of that.
They went through the pains of saying that he was in a relationship with this other woman. She's been on the ship for 2 years. They loved each other. So they set it up for him, the guy that kills himself at the beginning, to also be like a jealous lover that he thinks... Troi thinks that she kills Worf in a jealous rage. Like, that's part of the disassociative fantasy that she has. And so when Worf stops her from jumping at the very end, he's like, you seem surprised that I was alive. And she says, I thought I killed you. So we can think that the original suicide guy thought he killed his girlfriend. Is that what we're supposed to think?
The original suicide guy killed, like, the girlfriend on the ship?
Yeah, also had the same dream that he kills this woman he cares about. There's a love triangle. He commits suicide because of it.
Yes, I assume that he went through everything that Troi went through.
So she survived. She was stronger than him because she survived it and he did not.
No, she's only lucky enough to have Worf there instead of Riker, and Worf grabbed her before she could jump.
Oh, I thought she was just empowered.
No, Riker.
How dare you, Sean?
Riker could not save the first guy, although it would have been a very short episode if he actually had.
Right.
Well, but if he had the thought, if he had banged Worf first, maybe he would be injected with the Klingon whatever, and then he would have had the strength to withstand.
But what reality?
Sean, you really gotta watch this. You really gotta watch this episode again, man.
I'm pretty sure I got it.
I think I really like the twist here. I think it's a pretty effective twist. I think that it does leave you sort of confused as to when things happen, because I think we were talking, Tana, before, and we were sort of talking about whether or not the Riker and Worf conversation in 10 Forward happens, and it does happen. That's like the last real scene. After that, everything is fake until the very end. And I was kind of thinking that if the guy was on the ship, I was thinking that the way to do it would have him be sort of a serial killer, and that would have built into it. But the way that it works out, I find it satisfying. I also find it very not TNG, where the story isn't really resolved at the end with any sort of moral perfection. It's really just like, well, this guy killed his lover and her boyfriend, and then he killed himself, and what are you going to do? Which is weird for TNG.
Yep. And the one of the things that maybe should have been a flag, or I don't know when the dreams had started. I know now because you've just told me it's after the scene with Riker and Worf, but before that, I get to the end of the episode and I was like, was it all a dream? Pretty much from the moment that she got there, because Beverly has to mix her up a cocktail, and I'm thinking, is this all part of Troy's dream? That's such a detailed, unnecessarily complicated dream. But the thing that stuck out to me either way was, how on earth are they not going to turn this, whatever it is, this nacelle bay into a crime scene, right? Like, this is Suicide Mountain, right? Which is also a murder scene, which we find out halfway through the episode, or 2/3 of the way through the episode. But then Troi could just walk up to it anyway with only Worf there and no safeties, and it just seemed like a huge oversight on the Enterprise.
It seems like OSHA should have a complaint about how easy it is to throw yourself into the plasma stream, because you just have to open the door.
Yeah, that's it. And there's like 90 seconds in which, so you get a full minute and a half of standing there with no safeties that you could just like eventually fall. Like maybe there should just be, I don't know, tractor beam or automatic force field if anything tries to go into it.
Yeah, there's not even a fence. Like it's sort of like the fence is at the edge of a cliff that'll just be like,
wide
don't
open.
walk over this thing.
Yep.
I find the murder, I thought that the murder is sufficiently creepy in that. Like I think that was a good way for the show to get around how do you have a murder happen.
Yeah.
Have it happen 8 years in the past before the ship was really assembled, and disintegrate their bodies by throwing it into this energy field that they use for warp propulsion. I don't know, what did you have a problem with? Tana, you seem to like this episode quite a bit.
I did. I liked it.
Is there anything that stuck out as you're like, I don't like this part?
Well, anything that stuck out other than Worf?
Worf, he might have stuck out, but he did not strike out.
That didn't even happen. I'm reading this review that they didn't actually have sex.
Thing.
It was all
No.
I know.
Yeah, it's
and
just
so,
a fantasy.
like,
Boo.
her fantasy, so really I'm supposed to believe that her fantasy is fully clothed, hug snuggles in the morning? Come on.
I know. I think her fantasy is for
That's
Riker to
so
lose.
disappointing.
Fantasy should be for Riker to lose 50 pounds and stop being a girl.
Riker should have just walked in there. I agree, although I guess it's sort of reliving whatever that the Pierce's life was, because I assume that's how his life had actually worked out.
Yep.
I was
and he was...
I was a little bit disappointed we didn't see him. You know how they see his reflection, and that's how it's known that she's seeing it through his eyes. I thought we were going to get the shot of him putting up the panel where he hid the body. They don't show that, right?
Right, because she had just imagined it. He ended up incinerating the bodies.
Right.
So that was the invention of Troy's imagination, which does not hold up. It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Something you should know about me is that I am a Troi fangirl. So when I grew up and was watching Star Trek for the first time, I loved Troi. I thought Troi was awesome. I thought she was totally empowered and powerful. I didn't have any of the language or understanding to unpack how problematic her character is and how it's actually kind of the opposite of what I thought growing up.
Yeah.
And my favorite episodes are when she's in her uniform. And so for me, coming to it, as an adult, now I think there's a nostalgia factor for me, because she gets with Worf, which I love and don't think is ridiculous at all, and she's wearing her blue uniform. There's even a callback to her little purple leotard, she gets accosted in her room by the creepy guy in her imagination in the pink leotard or whatever it is.
Yep.
So for me, this is a Troi episode and I am 100% on board.
I think that I remember when we were starting to do these reviews, and I remember, Tana, you were talking about you being a Troi fangirl and about her empowerment and all that. And I remember thinking, I don't think Troy's empowered enough. I think she gets shortchanged a lot. And I'm glad that you agree now that you've rewatched it, because I had the same problem. When I was younger, I didn't have the capacity to unpack these things. Now I see Ensign Ro as being the most empowered woman on the show, and she's only in a handful of episodes, sadly.
Yep.
Followed by the Doctor. But I don't know. What do you think? Who's the most empowered lady?
I found Ro grated on me. So maybe I was very tomboyish, so maybe she was too much like me, and so there was a resistance to it or something. But Troi was just, as flawed as the character is from an analytic, adult perspective, as a kid, I loved seeing her at the right hand of Picard on deck, being, having this extrasensory skill. They didn't use it very well in the show, but she used it really well in my imagination. In my experience of the show, she was a very powerful character. So, the failings of the show didn't impact my young psyche in a negative way. And instead I got to see this very powerful, alien empath with a hilarious mother, doing all this cool stuff. So I think that there's still that thread of nostalgia.
Do you think that...
I'm going to say her mom is actually the most empowered one on the show.
Clearly.
Change my answer.
Do you think that Troi is the best detective of all the characters? And if not, who's the best detective?
I think Data is the best detective just by default because
Okay,
never
so
forgets anything.
on a story, like I was thinking that, I think on a story level, he's not... I guess my thing is that this episode sort of made it feel to me like I like Troi as a detective character because she's not particularly strong in any sort of deductive ways. Like Data is overpoweringly able to solve problems like this.
Yep.
I think that she has a sort of lack of like specific skills that is very useful for this kind of a story. I mean, they have to get around the fact that she's empathic, which they do in this one by having the other person be a beta Z.
Right.
Which, that's always the problem with the Troi is that her empathic abilities can kind of get in the way of stories sometimes. But I don't know. I think that she's very effective in this kind of a story. And I think that maybe the best part of the script is the fact that they tied in the previous romance into a new story, and it actually makes sense, and it's not just tacked onto it.
Yeah.
Because if that relationship wasn't there, this story is totally different because you wouldn't have that whole jealousy angle where Troi is in an altered universe.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I think that, I don't know if this is related to what Wes just said, but I think on paper Troi is awesome. The way she's designed, the intent for her seemed great. But then they had to downsize her and limit her powers a lot. And I think that it's like a slap in the face to what they could have done, which makes it feel very insulting to me that because she could be all powerful. She could be just as much of a weapon as Data is if her mental powers, were allowed to flourish. And they just never get there. And I don't know why they come up with this great card trick and then never
I think
really
part
use
of it
well.
is the constraints of being a 90s sitcom, right? Because if you can get inside...
Was that a joke or was that a slip of the...
No.
Okay, so a sitcom.
Is it not a sitcom? Is it, right? It's a show, serialized TV.
There's a little Full House in here.
There's some light Seinfeld influences that you can see in the later seasons. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I meant that completely straight-faced. So that's my opinion of the show. No, but that if it were like an HBO show or something like that, you could play Troi in a sort of like psychic espionage kind of way, right? Like if you can infiltrate and manipulate someone's emotions, right? You know what they're feeling, then there's a whole new world of possibilities. She could become a very three-dimensional, very sort of gray character in the way that like good and evil to get, a means to an end to, better serve the Enterprise or something. Right. But you're not going to be able to do that in 90s television. And so she was sort of hamstrung as a character by the nature of the show she was on.
I think that now that, as you guys have been saying that, I'm sort of a little bit surprised. And maybe you two would be the ones to sort of appreciate this, Clay, too, obviously. But I'm sort of surprised that Troi never had a Dark Phoenix episode.
I was just thinking about that.
Where she becomes
Data
like
got
super
5
powerful.
of them.
Right. Like not even like an artificial life form or whatever like the Phoenix is supposed to be, but just like her powers don't. She never has an episode where her powers sort of become more powerful.
Right.
Yep, you can't. She loses control, and her powers get cranked up to 11, and and she takes over. There's never something like that, and it feels like there should have been. It would have been an easy. It's an easy reach. It's low hanging fruit.
They think that if they had redone this now on a Netflix model or whatever, knowing what we know now about aggressive storytelling like in Westworld or what have you, I feel like they would do that now. I feel like it's such obvious low-hanging fruit, as Tana said, that they would absolutely do that. They'd have to try to not tie it in with Phoenix or any of these other sort of tropes that we've seen, but I think they would definitely try it out.
Yes, I think that it's like I think that like there hasn't really been any sort of upside or downside to her empathic powers. Like she seems to be the priority target for other telepaths in previous episodes. Like that's pretty much the extent of why she's unique
Right.
Amongst
Yep.
characters.
And kids. Telepaths and kids.
Right, yeah.
I think the most empowered I've seen Troi is when in Nemesis, the movie, she gets revenge on the guy that kind of raped her. And she's
Remen.
got her hand on the console, and she's basically steering the ship, closing her eyes, trying to find the son of a bitch out in space. And she gets him. And she locks target, and she's just like, there you are, asshole. And then they fire. It's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much... It is a little bit weird that they never really powered her up or did anything sort of odd about that. Like you'd think she'd be a prime target for weaponization.
Yeah,
and
I
things
would
like
totally
that,
take advantage. Well, that came out the wrong way.
that's Worf's job. I think we've talked about this one though. I think it's interesting. Did you enjoy watching this episode? Sean didn't watch it. I enjoyed.
I very much enjoyed watching it.
I was actually a little bit scared. Frakes' acting in the opening the teaser is not great. When the guy jumps and he just bangs on the wall, he's like, "Damn it."
That's right. I forgot about that.
That's a real bad acting from Jonathan Frakes, who has been doing spectacular work up until that point. So I was prepared for the episode to. And I was also they probably spent the first 5 minutes with Troi talking to like the guy's actual girlfriend or whatever she was on the ship.
Yep.
And I thought that if the episode continued in that way, it was going to be a surefire disaster. But they get off of that real quick.
Yep. And it seemed like they had to prioritize the fact that this guy had a relationship. So I think they were really going for the similarity between his experience, which we never get to see,
right,
and Troy's experience. And so I
think
wish I could remember what he says at the beginning, because right before he kills himself, because I think Troi is in the process at the end of saying the same thing.
He does. He says, "I know what I have to do." Like they know that they have to kill each other. I agree. I think it's actually kind of a relatively subtle script for TNG.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to make these connections that aren't immediately obvious, or the script isn't calling out. But I think it's good. But anyway, let's go to our final thoughts and feelings. So we're going to take a little break, play an audio clip, and then me, Tana, and Sean are going to come back and give our final thoughts and ratings for Eye of the Beholder.
Lieutenant Corell seems to be enjoying your company.
I'd like to think so.
Are you involved with her?
I'm not sure yet. Why, are you interested in her?
No. But if I were, I would, of course, discuss the situation with you before proceeding further.
I appreciate it, but that really wouldn't have been necessary.
I mean, I would never want to come between you and someone you are involved with, or had ever been involved with.
Is there someone in particular that you're talking about?
No. Is there someone in particular you would rather I not be involved with?
Mr. Worf, you sound like a man who's asking his friend if he can start dating his sister.
No, I was merely... Never mind. Excuse me, sir.
All right, guys. That's it. This is your final thoughts and feelings and ratings and whatever the fuck I say.
This is my final thought and feeling ever.
You're just going to turn off your computer and sit there silently staring at the wall.
It's our
I'm
final,
just gonna throw myself into a nacelle.
Well, before Sean kills himself and leaves... when we go to your funeral and we have to stop by your house, I'll open the door and there'll be a psychic blast of my life living through your eyes.
You know, if my most erotic fantasy was the long, lingering, awkward hug with my clothes on, then I might kill myself too.
There's a lot of bad ones I guess I'd want to replace with that situation, but not many of the better ones. But guys, let's talk about Eye of the Beholder. Where do we think on our scale of 1 to 5? And if you guys are on YouTube, please vote in the poll. You can click on the video and the little thing will pop up. You can vote on our 1 to 5 scale.
I'm going big. I'm going big because I am going home. This will be my last rating.
Yeah.
I'm giving it a 4. I'm giving it a solid 4. I really liked it. I liked Troi episodes. It was a good mystery. I think the reflection thing is memorable. The guy that played the bad guy was super creepy, which I think is necessary. And Worf and Troi make out. So this is a solid 4 for me.
Interesting. Sean?
Sorry, I wasn't yawning at you. I was tired.
That's Sean's review.
Sorry, that came across as rude. I apologize. No, I'm going to go 3.5 on this. I am compelled by some of Tana's reasoning. Yeah, I don't think the Troi Worf thing makes sense at all. But I feel like, why not? Ain't nothing else going on in this season.
I'm a little bit tempted to give it a 4 just because it tries to bring in previous storylines, and it does it in a really natural way that doesn't feel like it's just a clunky B story stuck onto an episode. And if I was to talk myself out of it,
don't talk yourself out of it. Give it a 4.
If I was to try to talk myself out of it, I suppose that I'd say that the major problem with it is maybe it's slow start. I guess there's really no reason why this can't be a 4. I enjoyed it. My wife enjoyed watching it. I think that just pretty much hits what I think of as a 4 when I rate them. That people can watch it.
Can I give you a little bit of visual resistance on that on your grading?
Yes,
quest?
Please do.
If this episode was in season 5, I think you would boil it down to a 3. Do you think to that?
I think that's also fair to say, and I've been thinking about that.
Take that, Ford. USA.
Like, Eye of the Beholder is not as good as
a season. Some
of the other
season
4s.
4.
Yeah, that's true. I'm like would I?
Yeah, it's like when you're in the middle of a hurricane. In the exact center, and the sun comes out for a second while the cows and cattle are swirling around you. It does feel nice to sit in the sun when you're surrounded by all that awful chaos.
That is true. I appreciate the Helen Hunt argument.
What's the problem here? Just enjoy the eye of the hurricane, give it a 4, and let's all move on.
I'll mix it up. I'll be the negative. Tana, your 4 will balance it out. I'll give it a 3. I think it's a very strong 3.
Bam!
I think that Sean's point is probably true. I'm looking at a list of previous 4s, and it would be on the bottom of that selection. I think it's a good mystery, though, and I enjoy the good mystery episodes. And this one always leaves me wondering how it's going to resolve, and it always feels very satisfying when it's done.
Nice.
Thank you both for coming on. Thank you for your continued support of the podcast and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Wes, can I tell you my most surprising thing for this entire thing that you've been doing,
sure.
Or at least my part of it? I was floored that you loved the Royale episode. I have never been able to forget that.
Everyone seems to be. That's something that I made the best of season 2, and people are like, "Are you a fucking idiot? Why is the Royale so high up on your list?"
Yeah.
And the Royale is great. And I don't know what people are talking about.
I was impressed too because I know Wes. I know you're not a big Loxana fan, but the episode where she's dating that guy who's gonna allow himself to be killed, I believe you gave that a 4 or 5, which I thought was. Considering your Loxana hatred, I thought it was very strong of you to see through that hatred to appreciate what was there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think I've done a fairly okay job of being objective here.
Yeah, I would agree.
The best comments I get from people who listen to the podcast say that the show is a good combination of serious and not serious, and I think that's what we are trying to do here. I think that the podcasts are like a balancing act of those two things. If you're not serious enough, no one really wants to listen to it. If you're too serious, it gets boring.
Yeah.
And I think we're in that sort of sweet spot here.
Now you have a kid, do you imagine one day when he's old enough, he's going to listen to Daddy's Star Trek podcast, and he's going to lose all respect for you when he sees that you like the Royale, and it's going to lead to a massive fight?
He's going to post it on some futuristic version of Facebook, which I won't understand because I'll be too old, and it'll just be so embarrassing for me when people, come up to me with my Google glasses on and tell me that they saw that episode of my podcast. I don't know, although I've been holding him watching the episodes enough where maybe it's starting to sink into him. I'm not forcing him to watch. It's just he's young enough where I have to hold him all the time, so he's clearly just has to sit with me as I watch these episodes. Yeah. He seemed very interested in Troi, so maybe he's going to become a next generation of Troi.
Put him in a little Wesley Crusher onesie, I think that would be awesome.
Oh God!
He's got a couple. Pictures. He's got the I just boldly went onesie, and nice. he's got the I run this ship onesie. So he's building up off that.
All right.
But yeah, seriously, you two, thank you very much for coming on. I apprate your time.
Thanks so much for having us. This has been a pleasure.
It has been. It's been very good. Guys, thank you very much for listening. If you're out there on YouTube, like and comments, appreciate it. iTunes rating review helps get the show out there. Rate us on all the podcatchers, everything out there that has a rating system that you listen to the show. Please rate it. We appreciate it. iTunes, I mentioned that. Facebook.com/The Penske Podcast. Go there, join the discussion. And lastly, Patreon.com/The Penske Podcast. For a couple dollars a month, you support the show. You get to listen to extra content. Not always about Star Trek. Sometimes it's about movies, TV shows, blah, 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 blah. We got Highlander coming out. Clay's
You're
very
like the
excited.
Micro Machine Man. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome.
178 episodes of this, and I can spit
And
it all
remember,
out.
if
Guys,
it doesn't say Penske, it's not the real thing.
that's right. Boom. I always confuse the Micro Machine Man and the Dunkin' Donuts guy. Do you remember the Dunkin' Donuts guy? They look very, very similar to each other. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. I Am the Beholder. I'm going to be back in a couple days with Genesis.